Welcome to the Combat Zone. I'm Joseph, and he's Nick. Oh, man. Don't laugh at me, man. Your mic's off, Nick. Your mic's off, Nick.
I was just looking at your face, and you have this, I hope I get this right look on your face while you're lining, teeing all that up.
I know.
This is the Combat Zone, folks. It's great to have you along. We've got what I think is probably the most interesting show we've ever done. Tonight we have as a interview coming up in the first half of the second hour.
Right, top of the hour.
Right. Stick around for that. Tom Harris of International Client Science Coalition will be our guest. And he's always a really fascinating guy to talk to because, number one, he doesn't go around pretending to be something he's not. He never claims to be a climate scientist, I should say. He understands, as a mechanical engineer, a lot of the different things that go into climate, but he'll be the first to admit that he's not a climate science. So at least you know where he's coming from, and I really respect that from Tom. I think I wish certain other so-called scientists, like geneticists, fruit fly geneticists, would be a little more honest about their backgrounds.
Right. Is he a geneticist or a biologist?
Well, he's got his degree, he's got his PhD, and we're talking about Dr. David Suzuki, has his degree, PhD I think it is, in fruit fly genetics.
Okay. The genetics of the fruit fly.
Like anybody cares, but I'm not suggesting it's not a worthy area of study, but it has precious little to do with how the planet works on a climate-size scale.
Okay, but
climate works on a planet-size scale.
Nature and the environment and biology is all very important. And so, but before we get into all of this, because we have a great lineup tonight, so if make sure you stick around for the second hour as well. You're definitely going to want to listen to Tom. And if you want to call in live and join the conversation tonight, guys, toll free 844-415-2115. That's anywhere in North America. And you can chat live if you're on the live page at thecombatzone.ca. You'll see that there's a little bubble in the player. And if you want to chat live and get into the conversation that way because you're too shy to call in, that's okay. Do it that way, and we'll monitor what people are saying. Anyway, I'm sounding really confused, but Nick, to kick off the show tonight, we have to talk about I don't know what to call it, Killdeer Gate.
Well, I've suggested that for anybody living outside the regional Ottawa area who isn't aware of this story, every year in the city of Ottawa, they have a musical event that lasts about 10 days. It's a major event for the city. It's called Blues Fest. And it's not really about just the blues. They bring in all kinds. Great Big C's been here. There's been all kinds of different acts that have come. And it's really a celebration of music.
Right. And lots of cities do this.
It's not unique to Ottawa.
It's a music festival.
Absolutely.
It just happens to be focused on the blues, but it could be country music festival.
Yep.
Could be Nashville.
Right.
Could be, Save the World or whatever it was that they had in Toronto.
We are the world.
One time.
We are the children.
No, that's Feed the World or something like that.
I'm dating myself with that one.
No, there was something. What was that? That was about 10 years ago or something like that.
What, that? We Are the World?
No. I don't know about the song, but they had a huge festival there, and I can't remember. It was something to do with, I don't know, maybe it was a hurricane.
I'm talking about the thing Michael Jackson did for Saving Africa.
Right.
Back in the 90s.
Right. Yeah, there was a whole bunch of them that did that.
Yeah.
Don't they know it's Christmas time?
Oh, yes, that was another one.
The irony of that, of course, is that most people in Africa don't celebrate Christmas. But of course,
so, of course, they don't know it's Christmas.
They don't know it's
what
Christmas
do they care?
Time, right?
They haven't seen a sleigh in 1,000 years.
Yeah. And look, in fairness, I do have to say this, Nick, okay, that the people that do these things and that donate to them, and they donate their time and their money, and they have their hearts are in the right place for the most part. Okay, so let me just make sure that people understand that we're not impugning anyone's motives. We're conservatives. We're not liberals. Okay, so we accept the fact that people on the left who do this kind of thing and people on the right, their motives are pure, and if they're not pure, we're still going to give them credit for it. But let's get back to Birdgate.
Okay, so to set the stage, they're putting everything together for the Blues Fest. which means a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Where people sell confectionery, not confectionaries. Where people sell hot dogs and
confectionaries.
Okay, maybe I
think that is the right word for it.
They have stages
little
to put
stands.
up. They've got
people
beer
are selling these
up.
little things and stuff like that. Right.
So there all this temporary construction is going on, and in the middle of it all, they find this little bird called a killdeer. Now, when I was growing up in Southern Ontario, we saw them all the time out in the fields. Okay,
right. I heard that they were an endangered species or protected or something like that.
What the difference is, I'm not quite sure.
I'm not sure why they would be protected.
It's
never
not like
heard
we're
that there was
running
a
out of
problem.
them.
Well, that's it. Yeah.
It's not like it's the last lunar moth butterfly on the planet. We got to protect it. Anyway, so these birds are very, very clever at disguising their nests and so on.
Right.
And when you get too close to the nest, the mother will go skittering off, dragging a wing. Okay, making it look like she's injured till you're far enough away from the nest, then she flies off.
Right.
So
there's a certain amount of intelligence. We don't know if they're self-aware, but that's important to this
I would call it instinct more than intelligence, but okay, fine. But anyway, the point is that during the run-up, as they're putting these things together, somebody finds a killdeer and its nest with a few eggs in it right in the middle of where they're going to put the stage.
Right.
Okay? Now, look. What's really interesting here is they're not interested in the killdeer itself.
Right. They're interested in the eggs.
Right. And what's in the eggs?
But before we get to that, Nick, let's make sure that everybody understands what happened here.
Okay.
Preparation for this major annual music festival
comes
to a
screeching halt.
Not just a halt, a screeching halt.
Right. Full on air brakes.
Not just slamming on the brakes, but picture the freight train
going in reverse.
Okay, and
the big drive wheels,
sparks flying up from the railway.
Absolutely,
from
they're
the
doing
railroad.
everything they can to stop
the rails.
This.
Okay, so everything comes to a screeching halt, and now the bureaucracy gets involved.
Well, first
they don't know what to do.
They give it its own security guard. They have a watch. Where they have people guarding this thing. And they bring in a biologist, and they look at this thing, and they study it, and they don't know, because the gestation period for killdeer eggs is about 28 days, 25 to 28, depending on how much time the mother sits on them, blah, blah, blah.
Okay,
that's great. So yesterday or today, I can't remember which one it was, they managed to get approval to move the nest.
Now, again, let's make sure everybody understands the whole thing. Okay. This is not something that they decided in a couple of hours.
Oh, God, no. This has taken a week.
This has taken close to a week.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, today is Wednesday, and when did I hear about this? I'm pretty sure it was
Thursday or Friday
last week.
Yeah.
I'm driving down the street, and I'm listening to the local news. And I hear that they're going to be having a press conference, to discuss, to let people know. See, they were going to have a press conference to inform the public of what was going on with this nest, okay? Which means that even before I heard of it and before they scheduled the press conference, this had become a major issue.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I don't know when it started, Wednesday or Thursday of last week, but it took, so they had to stew over this and analyze it and have meetings, etc., for a few days over the weekend, and I'm sure people got paid double time to come into the office.
Oh, well, this wasn't free. They don't do anything for free.
And to consult, and there must have been conference calls and meetings, and what
do we do about the bird? What do we do about the bird?
I'm not sure, but it wouldn't surprise me to learn that they actually even did some sort of an overnight poll.
You know what? With the way politicians poll things, I wouldn't be surprised to find that out either.
Just to figure out what the public was prepared to tolerate or not tolerate.
Well, see,
so there. Okay, I just wanted everybody to understand the magnitude of this. Okay,
you set the table brilliantly.
Okay, thank you, Nick. I like to paint a picture. You know me.
I know. You've got artwork all over the wall behind you.
Okay.
It's all
we have
color.
we have a green screen behind us.
That's what I mean.
And
it's all one color.
It's all green.
It looks great.
But if we were doing video tonight, we would have video of these
the killdeer.
Killdeer, you know.
There's a picture on. I've got a picture of it on Facebook.
You know, these killdeer.
Yep.
Will if you go after their eggs, killdeer will attack you. You know.
Yeah, it's not much of an attack, but okay.
Well, it's a
in
killdeer
defense of the
attack.
killdeer, they will come to the defense of their
But
young.
they don't call it a killdeer because it attacks deer.
No, it's the sound they make.
It's the sound they make.
Right,
Killdeer.
that's their call. Killdeer, killdeer, killdeer.
Right.
And I can't believe me. I'm no bird call imitator. So the only thing I can do is a duck, and that's about it.
Okay.
Anyway, so after all of that, they bring this biologist in, and some federal bureaucracy was it? Yeah, because it's on NCC land. Finally gave the permission to go ahead and try and move the eggs. So they moved the nest, I should say, the whole eggs and all, a whole 25 feet.
Right.
25 feet. And they said, well, the mother seemed to be okay with it. And at the same time, I'm scratching my head thinking, what kind of lunacy is this?
Well, again, I know where we want to go with this.
Yep.
But just before we
I'm
do,
just
because
setting your table.
No, I understand that. You are. I set the table, and you've put the food on the plates, and now I'm going to pour the gravy. I just want to pour the gravy. Okay.
All right.
Now, seriously, people. Okay. Before you click us off and go, okay, what are they doing talking about these birds? Okay, this is we're not just a comedy. We're not supposed to. I'm going to say
hard
that
not
we're
to
not
look at
just
this and not be a comedy.
We're not a comedy show at all, even though this is funny. You cannot, guys, you cannot make this stuff up. Okay, everything that we've said about this is rock solid, ironclad truth. Okay,
that's right.
This was it turned the city inside out for several days. And I just want to say before we get to the serious stuff, because there is a very serious aspect to this that we want to talk about, and that is I'd like to see what the final bill is. I'd like to know how much money that we spent on saving the killdeer eggs. Okay, I just like to know, just to satisfy my curiosity.
It'll shock you. I can tell you right now the amount of money that they have already spent. I mean, you got to pay the biologist, right? You got to pay the security guard. There's a loss in productivity because they can't get the job they were put back. So people are going to have to work overtime to get the Blues Fest ready in time. So there's all that has to be taken into account. There's all the bureaucratic nightmare going on behind the scenes that all has to be taken into account.
Right.
Nothing. The government doesn't do anything for under $1 million.
Well, I don't know if they spent $1 million
I'm just being
on this,
a little
but
facetious, but
no. If it came back in the order of $1 million that they spent on this, it wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me. But there's a serious
Sadly,
aspect. There's a serious angle to this, Nick, because we're making fun of the killdeer and we called it Birdgate and Killdeergate or anything like that. But really, all of this was not about saving that mother bird.
No, this is all just to get to this
bird would have
point.
flown away, not a problem. And it wasn't about saving the nest because, after all, the nest is just the material that the mother bird used to build the nest.
Right.
It wasn't even, I want people to think about this, it wasn't even about saving the eggs because, after all, what is an egg?
It's calcium.
This was about saving the unborn chicks, not chicks, but birds.
Well, they're called chicks at that stage.
In those eggs.
That's right.
The preborn birds.
Right. And yet, at the same time, if anyone were to suggest that saving unborn human children is worthy of even half that attention, they would bring hellfire down on them.
Well, forget about half. Just a I don't know, a 5%, 1%. I think that's really important. I think it says a whole lot about where our society's gotten to.
Yep.
And we're not even here talking about whether or not abortion is right or wrong.
It's
because
just a
I think
contrast.
you and I think see eye to eye on abortion. We think abortion is wrong.
That's right.
I don't know personally where I stand on the legal issues around it and the legislative issues around it. I don't know 100%. I know where my leanings are, but I understand that there's legal complexities to the whole thing and that.
Right.
Okay, I get all of that. But from a moral point of view, I think you and I both agree that abortion is wrong. It's taking the life of an unborn child. And that's from conception to natural, to birth, okay?
Yeah.
All right. So, all right.
But I think what we're looking at here is what I call disordered priorities. When you put, in this case, birds, and value them more than you do your own unborn, you have a serious problem.
Right.
And that's really what's at the heart of this. This is why, on one hand, it's kind of lighthearted. Like, I think that the new logo for the Blues Fest should be a killdeer sitting on a nest, okay, on a flag over top the main tent. I think that ought to be their logo for next year. Now, that's kind of a lighthearted, but really underneath it all, underneath the frivolity and the joviality of the situation, I think I just invented a new word.
Joviality.
Joviality.
Is that a word?
It is now.
Okay.
I know conviviality is. I watched the Pirates of the Caribbean. I know Muppet Treasure Island, so I know it's real.
Okay.
Because that's what one of the characters
I take
says
your word for it.
Yeah. Great movie. Anyway, but there is this undercurrent of disordered priorities. Like animals, and I use that in the broadest sense,
of course,
have more value than human beings do.
Right.
If you have a human being that is mauled by a cougar, killed by a cougar, and then the cougar is shot and found, and they find out that it's got cubs, they will raise money. And this is a true story out of California. This actually happened.
No doubt.
They had the mother, the human mother that was killed, had 2 or 3 kids, and so did the cougar that was killed, had a couple cubs. They raised money for both. And the cougars outpaced the human children $10 to 1. So for every $1 the humans got, the cubs got 10.
Well, again, just finishing the thought that I had earlier, where I was saying that, you and I think, pretty much see eye to eye on the issue of abortion. But what's troubling me here, I don't even want to get into whether abortion is right or wrong or good or bad and whether we should allow it or shouldn't allow it. I think what I find the most disturbing about this subject is that people actually were concerned. They found it to be some kind of a moral dilemma. They thought about it. They paused. They scratched their heads and said, should we just destroy these eggs, or should we, save these unborn birds? And they elected to save the unborn birds. Okay, but again, what's disturbing me is the fact that when it comes to the birds, that's actually a question. It's a question.
Yeah.
Okay? People pause and they think about it and they go, I don't know, what's the right thing to do here? But when it comes to abortion, when it comes to human children who are not yet born, including, I want to stress this, okay? People have to understand this. In Canada, we have no laws restricting abortion. And that's something that most people don't actually know and understand. They don't know what the implications of that are, if they do know that that's the case. And the implications are that you can kill an unborn child, a preborn child, right up until the point where the foot is leaving
the womb,
the uterus of the mother,
right,
or the birth canal of the mother. Okay, that's the law in Canada. Until that child is 100% delivered, the law is that child is not a person and is not entitled to legal protection. That's the law right now. By the way, that's not constitutional. That's a different subject altogether. But that's the law.
Yeah, and that's, I agree with you. Again, you and I are on the same page on that. I want to.
So go ahead.
I just want to give a shout out to Mark. He's in the chat room. Nice to see you, Mark. Glad to see that you're in the chat room. So if anybody wants to join Mark, just go to the website,
combatzone.ca.
That's right. Click on that little icon that looks like a chat bubble or a thought bubble from the old cartoon days, and you'll end up where Mark is. And then you can join the conversation as well.
Actually, it's funny because when you said chat bubble, I just realized that most chat programs on your smartphone use those little conversation bubbles.
That's right.
That's probably why they're using it in the player.
Yeah, could very well be. People are comfortable with it. They use it because they feel good with it.
So, listen, let's get...
I don't want to get distracted by that.
Let's get back to the topic because, again, this is very important. I want to say this again. I want people to really understand that there's zero difference biologically, intellectually, developmentally, scientifically, whatever standard, whatever metric you want to use. There is no difference between the child 1 hour before
or 1 hour
he
after.
or she is delivered or 1 hour after.
Yep. The only difference
It's
is what
not
side of the
legal
body
if
it's
you-
on.
That's right. If you kill that child 1 hour before, it's perfectly legal. Not because the law says it's legal, but because we don't have any laws.
Precisely.
And I think that's a very serious problem.
Well, I don't want to dwell too long on the abortion side of things, but I think it's a very valid point to bring up to say that we have a real problem of disordered priorities in this country when you have something like bird eggs stopping a multi-million-dollar construction project or not a construction project, but the temporary construction for a multi-million-dollar event that's going to benefit the city and so on. The right thing to do would simply have been to dispose of the eggs and carry on. This never should have been a story. This never should have made the press. This was 30 seconds of somebody saying, well, I guess it's time. I guess it sucks to be the bird, and just deal with the eggs and get on with it. That's the rational thing to do. But we've lost a sense of rationality that we don't have anymore.
And the funny thing is, if you want to call it funny, is that the very people who turned themselves inside out over saving these eggs probably had eggs for breakfast that morning, or at least one morning. And if they didn't have eggs for breakfast, they had something.
I know a guy who had eggs for breakfast this morning.
Well, they had to have something that contained eggs. Okay, you had a cake, or you had
it's
something.
hard to stay away from egg product. That's for
it's
sure.
hard to stay away from egg products. Okay.
Now, to be fair,
am I the only one that sees the irony in this?
Well, to be fair, the eggs that you and I consume for breakfast, or in our cakes, or in those kinds, are non-fertilized. They're never going to hatch into a chick. But the point is valid. In one case, eggs are okay, and the next case, they're not. And that I just can't get my head around how people would not think, just sucks to be a killdeer today. Sorry about your luck. Like, let me give you a personal example. One of the problems we have on the farm is we have beavers in our pond, and there's a stream that flows through the pond. And if I don't control the beavers, the pond backs up, floods my neighbor's hayfield, and I get yelled at.
Okay, hang on now. You better be careful because somebody might report you. I don't know if you need a permit to do what you're going to tell me you're doing.
Anyway.
Okay, go on.
I was down at the pond, and I had my rifle with me, and I saw this body swim around the far end. There's a little island in our pond.
Was this while you were on a conference call with me and George?
No,
it was
just before that.
Occasion?
That was a different day.
Okay.
Anyway, so this beaver swims around the far end of the thing. I line up on him and pow, take him out. Because they're a pest animal, I can remove them. I don't need a permit. Okay? Then I notice the tail isn't flat. It's long and skinny. It's not a beaver, it's a muskrat. Mr. Muskrat picked a bad day to look like a beaver. Sorry about your luck. I mean, I didn't want to shoot the muskrat. The muskrat wasn't the problem. But it was something that just happened. And I didn't lose a lot of sleep over it. And I really wish people would get their heads squared away about what animals are and are not.
Now, did you do anything with the pelts?
Not in the summertime. They're not worth anything.
No?
Not too thin. If you want to use animal fur, you usually go after them in the fall. Like in beavers, especially in October, November, when they're putting on they've got their heavy coat on. That's when the trappers go after them.
And that's when they're the least pesky.
Oh, no. No, that's that. As a matter of fact, it's almost because they're packing away as much as they can for the wintertime. So while there's no leaves on the trees, they take the trees down anyway. And a beaver will not necessarily take down every tree he chews on, which makes it even worse because now had an elm tree that was 8 inches across, and he went 4 inches through it and quit. So he killed the tree but didn't drop it. So now when the tree dies, the wind blows, and who knows which way that's going to fall, and who knows what it's going to land on. So I had to cut it down. So I wasn't ready to. The tree wasn't mature yet. I was going to let it grow till it was, 2.5 feet across. When it dies on its own, then I'll cut it down for firewood. But I wasn't ready to take it out yet. The beaver decided I should take it out. So they're not what my wife would say. We as a country, the Americans have a bald eagle. The Russians have the bear. The British have the lion. What do we get? A buck-tailed, flat-toothed, glorified rat. That's what we got for a national animal.
And not just that, a national food, too.
Yeah.
Don't forget Hillary Clinton coming to Ottawa a couple of years ago, and it was big news because she walked around in the Byward Market and bought a beaver tail. She wanted to have that beaver tail.
Oh, I'm not sure that's the same kind of beaver tail you and I are thinking of.
No, it is the kind of beaver tail I'm thinking about right now.
It's not the kind of beaver tail I'm thinking about.
No, I knew that. I think...
Apparently they're quite good, though.
I really don't know. They looked a little too sugary for me.
I remember somebody talking about having a state dinner back when, was it Trudeau or somebody, a long disco back like 20 years, and they had beaver tail, real beaver tail, on the menu. Smoked beaver tail.
Can you eat it?
Yeah. It's nothing but muscle.
I don't know. It's a great question. I don't know.
Yep.
One of the great delicacies that we have here, that we cook here, you'll have to come over for dinner when we do it, is beef tongue.
Oh, I've had beef tongue. It's great. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Had beef tongue.
I know lots of people that won't eat it,
heart. Beef heart, you really got to marinate.
Right. It's tough. It's very tough. I
remember when I was first going over to my fiance's place, her brother thought he could gross me out. He took a piece of beef heart on his fork, and he would just sit there going bump, 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 bump on the table. I looked at him. I said, Les, what are you doing? He said, oh, nothing. I said, you realize that's beef heart? I said, yeah. I said, you realize I've eaten beef heart all my life. Oh. Anyway.
Okay. Well, we're coming up on the bottom of the hour, so I think what we'll probably do is take a couple of minutes break, and we will be back soon.
Okay, guys, welcome back to the Combat Zone. I'm Nick. He's Joseph. I almost blew it. I recovered nicely.
What is it with us?
I don't know. We're going to have to start
wearing name tags. I haven't made that mistake, but now you've got me psyched out because now every time I do an intro, I'm thinking about it. Okay, I'm Joe and he's Nick.
Yep. Well, we're going to have to put name tags on. That's all there is to it. Remember that when we were both in the Navy, we had name tags on our shirts? I still have an old work shirt around somewhere. I'll go get it and put my name on it.
Yeah, my first name was not on mine.
Joseph, fair enough. Okay, but I'm sure I can find one that says Nick. And
it's okay. We'll do like in kindergarten. We'll just pin these big signs on. Okay. All right. Our number to call is toll-free North America. 844-415-2115. Again,
that's the same number I got.
I know. You held it up there, and I didn't see it. I did it by memory.
Oh, see,
I remember my name.
I was ready.
I remember the number, and I remember your name, Nick.
Well, you're a step ahead of me because one of those three I don't always get right.
Okay, so we were talking in the last segment about kill deer crisis or Birdgate, or I don't know. We have to come up with some other cute name. So if you guys out there could think of one, post it in the chat room or something like that, or call in. But I think what we really want to talk about in this segment, Nick, is I know you were doing a little bit of research on this, and again, just to set the table a little bit, all of the talk about what we're going to do with these eggs, etc., comes from this, I think, a misplaced sense of morality.
Right.
And it always bothers me. Just let me get this off my chest.
Sure.
It always bothers me when the left says, you cannot legislate morality. That's a no-no. You cannot legislate morality. And I think to myself, yeah, but every argument that the left makes and every action that they take politically or otherwise is completely imbued with a sense of moral rectitude and moral outrage. So, it's a lie, really, when you think about it. I'm not arguing against morality in politics. I think it's actually a good thing.
Right.
But it bothers me that these guys on the left, and so many people out there who are not on the left or the right, but just otherwise thinking people, get bamboozled by this. And they might have a sense of right and wrong, but they don't talk about what's right or wrong. And, we were just talking about abortion, right?
Right.
I think that most people would go, I'm morally troubled by abortion, but they don't want to say it publicly, and they don't want, there's this sense that they don't want their politicians to deal with it because they've bought into this false argument on the left that you can't legislate morality, when in fact everything the left does legislatively is about morality.
Well, that's true of either side of the coin. Legislation is about morality.
Well, yeah, philosophically speaking, to the extent that legislation posits a theory of what's right and what's wrong, okay, all laws are moral at their basic foundation.
I would challenge any lefty to come up and give me a law that's not moral at its root. Like everything from the Highway Traffic Act, how fast you can drive, to animal cruelty, to taxation, you name the law. And it's all based on some kind of moral foundation. So for them to say you can't legislate morality is a mighty red herring. It's a way of deflecting the argument. And I think, just to carry on with your point, what happens is conservatives, we work in the realm of common sense, logic, and reason and try to keep emotion out of it. On the left, it's all about emotion. And when they start to get excited, we back off saying, we don't want to cause a fuss. When in fact, what we ought to do is say, look, put that nonsense aside. Let's deal with the facts. Call me whatever you want. I don't care. I got a thick skin and a stiff spine, and I'm willing to stand up for what I believe in. And if you can't prove to me why, let's take the research. This is a great way to get into this research. A lot of people, I've made an executive decision that from now on, all the lefties out there are going to get called Lou. I'm just going to use that like the royal we, okay? So all the Lou's out there will say, corporations, they make billions. And if they just turned in their profits, we could solve the homelessness all across the world. We could solve, as if that would end it, we could solve poverty as if that would somehow cure it. They go on and on and on. And yet, they never, ever look at their own elite, their part of the 1%, and say, what about you? So what I did was I came up with some numbers. Here's just 3 people, all of which all are in the entertainment industry and are all huge lefties, okay? Robert De Niro, his net worth, $200 million. Leonardo DiCaprio, $245 million. Now, before I go on, a lot of people would say, I would ask, and I'm asking the Lou's of the world, how much, if you said, look, nobody needs more than $5 million, are you willing to go to De Niro and say, cough up $195 million because we want to feed the homeless?
Well, Lou probably is.
Yeah, well, that's my point.
Right.
So the point,
but I guarantee
not to these guys, he's not.
No, sure, no, he probably would be. The problem is that these guys would tell him to take a long walk off a short pier.
Right. They're not interested in actually living up to the standard they want the rest of us to live with. And the third candidate on this is Oprah Winfrey, one of the most successful people on the planet. She's worth $3.1 billion. Okay? So, if you wanted to apply the same standard to them that you want to apply to corporations or right-wing multi-billionaires and millionaires, you'd have to say to them, come on, cough it up. That, between just those 3 people, is almost $3.5 billion. How many homeless shelters could you build for that? How many food pantries or community kitchens or whatever? I'm thinking of the name food banks could you stuff with that? You know, how much health care could you provide for the poor for that kind of money? And yet, you're right. If you went to Oprah and said you only need $5 million a year, cough up the rest. It's a great cause. You know, all of a sudden they're not interested. And more importantly, you never, ever see the Naomi Kleins of the world or the DiCaprios of the world or people like that who think like that outside the gated villages that these people live in saying, hey, what about the poor? How can you live in these palaces? It's always the Koch brothers. It's always people in the captains of industry. It's always the moneylenders and bankers. I'm not saying that they're pure as the wind and snow, but if you're going to have a standard over here for one group, why does it not apply to the other? And I guess that I just needed to get that off my chest because the hypocrisy is so thick you could cut it with a knife.
Well, that's what it is. It's hypocrisy. But I'm going to defend these guys. I am going to defend the Leonardo DiCaprios and the Robert De Niros and the Oprah Winfreys of the world because they're doing what everybody else is doing in free capitalist, free market societies, and they're just selling their talent and making a lot of money doing it.
And I'm not knocking them either. I'm not suggesting that they actually do these things.
And, you know, if you look at somebody like Oprah Winfrey, she's probably, with her net worth, what was it? $3.1 billion. Well, she doesn't have, as you know, because you and I talk about this, she doesn't have $3.1 billion sitting around in cash in her bank or whatever.
That's right.
She's invested it. She's probably got stocks in different companies
she's got her
around
own
the
company
world.
She's the head of. I mean,
she has her own company, absolutely.
Yeah,
and her company. You know, I'm curious what the carbon footprint of her company is.
Yeah, well, don't
how
ask
many
that
trees
question.
get killed with the magazine
to make her magazines?
So I'm not throwing stones. I'm saying that they're all capitalists. They've whether by design or by accident, luck or not luck, hard work. They've been successful, and it's their property, and they're entitled to it, and I defend them 100%.
I agree with you.
What I don't defend the people who don't target them. Of course, I don't think that anyone should be targeted because they've made a lot of money.
Right.
But a guy like Robert De Niro, okay, who is, he's a great actor.
He is.
He's a great actor, okay? I love Robert De Niro as an actor. Mm-hmm. But holy cow. I mean, come on, guys. And you know what I was going to say? It's a separate subject altogether, okay? I know this is... did you hear about the Fox News commentator who was doing a segment with a fellow, I can't remember who it was now, but who happened to be an African-American. And this African-American commentator happened to say something that this other guy thought was particularly outrageous. And so he made the terrible, terrible mistake of saying, now just wait a cotton-picking minute.
Uh-oh.
And got suspended.
Yeah, I know.
Because it was a racist comment.
Right.
And, when I thought about it, I go, okay, that's a really common saying. You don't hear it that much anymore, but gosh. No, but
that assumes,
growing up, I heard that all the time, and I still use it sometimes.
So do I. But that
never occurred to me that there was a racial connotation to that.
Because there's not. Believe it or not, there were other people other than blacks who pick cotton.
But I don't even know if it has anything to do with picking cotton.
It's simply an exclamation point at the end of a sentence.
I mean, is somebody going to come out? Am I going to be sued by somebody by the name of Samuel Hill the next time I go, what the Sam Hill are you talking about?
Yeah, well, you never know in today. Now, I'm just looking at Facebook here, and there's a comment I want to deal with. Eli says, he's talking about Oprah now. Goes to show you have no idea how generous Oprah is and has been. She's built schools and donated millions in addition to providing help and support to millions of Americans. Eli, what you don't understand is we're not knocking her.
Yeah, no, in fact, we're defending her.
Exactly.
We think that's a wonderful thing.
That's what you're supposed to do with that kind of money.
Oprah has been very economically very successful, and you are dead right, Eli. She has contributed millions upon millions, tens of millions, however much. She does a lot of great things with her money. The point I would make is, so do the Koch brothers.
Exactly.
Okay, so do these other guys. So do the Rockefellers. So do the, they're not, these guys are not sitting on piles of money.
Well, look at Morris Stronach here in Canada. Came here as an immigrant with nothing in his pockets and built an auto parts industry.
Right.
He's a huge company, all based on the sweat of his brow and the muscles in his back.
Right.
And turned it over to Belinda. We all know how well that went. Anyway, politically anyway. But it's a great company, employs hundreds of thousands of people, so why should he not reap the benefits of taking that risk in the first place?
Right, directly and indirectly.
Exactly.
Right.
So the point I'm making is we're not
And he does great things with it. I happen to know the Stronachs does do, the family has done some very, very decent, good, charitable work.
You know, it's funny.
And they don't get credit for it.
This is one of the things I would love to ask the Lou's of the world. What do you think would happen if all of a sudden all these wealthy philanthropists who do things because they're the right things to do, whether you believe it or not, said, okay, if that's how you feel, we're not going to donate any more money to hospices. We're not going to give any more money to build wings on hospitals. We're not going to put up any more libraries. We're not going to fund anything. We're just going to keep our money to ourselves and be the kind of people you think we are. What would our society look like?
Well, you know, I guess what I would say, Nick, to Eli, and this is an interesting question as well, is why when we're raising what I think is an important and reasonable topic, do you automatically assume that we're putting down Oprah? Because I don't think we said anything that could be even remotely misconstrued as being critical of Oprah. In fact, I think we went out of our way, but nevertheless, people are going to go on Facebook and they're going to go, "Oh, you're criticizing Oprah."
Yeah, they listen with half an ear.
Why don't you listen to the whole thing, Eli? You know?
Well, actually,
I don't mean to throw stones at you, Eli. By the way, but I just wanted to get that off my chest. Like, now, chill out, man.
Marin has actually joined Mark in the chat room, and he says that she says a lot of what Oprah gives comes from her sponsors, and that may be true, but you got to have the success to attract the sponsors in the first place. Okay, so the point is we're not knocking people who are financially successful.
And again, in Oprah's defense, okay, she leverages her success and her celebrity status and her fame in order to convince and encourage sponsors to give more as well.
Right.
So it's win-win-win. So why do we care?
So this is why when I hear these progressives like Lou's, the Lou's of the world, start talking about how evil corporations are and how terrible it is that they can't get grant money to fund business ventures that no one else will touch.
Right. By the way, I just want to point out that in case people didn't know, Oprah is incorporated.
Well, we know that now, and that doesn't surprise me in the least. She wants to limit her liability. That's why they incorporate. But the point is...
And for tax purposes.
You know, that's another thing I want to mention. I'm glad you mentioned that, because do you really think that Robert De Niro, Leonardo DiCaprio, and the thousands of other multimillionaires who populate Hollywood, who get paid for memorizing lines and repeating them the way the director wants to... I'm not putting it down, but that's what they do, okay? Along with the physical body language and all that. They call them artists for a reason. But do you really think these people don't have accountants to protect as much of their wealth as possible from the tax man? Are you kidding me? Of course they do.
Of course they do.
Because it only makes financial sense to do that.
Of course they do.
So it's the kind of thing that there's so much ignorance out there disguised as quasi-intelligence. And I'm giving it too much credit even at that. I mean, when you present evidence, they bat it aside. Like I gave somebody on Facebook Henry Hazlitt's book. Is it? I keep calling him Henry. Is it Henry or Brian?
It's Henry. Henry Hazlitt.
Hazlitt. It's a 6-hour audiobook. I said, at least listen to this in small bits and pieces and let it sink in. This is the best economist of the 20th century. Oh, well, he's a libertarian. What does he know? He doesn't get political. He doesn't mention political leanings of he just talks about what different governments over the years have done and what works and what doesn't. But they can't see if they can't label him as something and bat him aside, now they're going to listen to him. And they don't want to do that because he shreds their arguments.
I don't know that. Well, I suppose Henry Hazlitt would have considered himself to be a libertarian, but whatever that means.
Yeah, that's another thing. What exactly does that mean?
Yeah,
I mean, because there's certainly a strong streak of libertarianism as in the modern definition of the word that I have within myself as well.
The irony is actually that Henry Hazlitt, while you and I would refer to him today as a libertarian, and I don't know how he considered himself or what he considered himself to be, but one thing I could tell you 100% for certain, that if Henry Hazlitt had lived and worked in the latter half of the 19th century, he would have been the quintessential liberal.
Absolutely. And that's another conversation we get into. Define liberalism. They say, you don't know what the word... It depends which ones you mean. Are you talking about the 1900 classic liberal? Or are you talking about the 2018 liberal, which bears no resemblance to the 1900th... the 20th century liberal.
19th century.
Thank you. That's the word I was looking for.
I knew you were looking for that.
I knew enough. I fish around long enough. You'll give me what I want. But the point I'm making is that I am a classic liberal because classic liberals believe in smaller government, more accountability, lower tax rates, more freedoms, more responsibilities. That's classic liberalism. So that's why when they ask me, well, you don't know what a liberal means. Well, it depends on how you define. I had a conversation that's a bit of a parallel to this. It's not political in the sense that we're talking, but my daughter asked me, when did World War II start? I said, well, it depends on who you ask. Because for the Chinese, it started in the mid-1930s. For the Germans, it started back during the Spanish Civil War. For the Americans, it didn't start till 1941. For Poland, it started September 1st, 1939. For the Russians, it didn't start till 1941, depending on when they launched Operation Barbarossa.
1941.
There you go. It's June 1941.
June 22nd. Just the anniversary just passed.
In other words, it all depends on who you're talking to. For Canada, it started September 10th, 1939, because we waited a week to be an independent country rather than do what we did in World War I. The moment Britain declared war, we declared war. We said, oh, no, we're independent. We'll wait a week. And then we declared war.
Right.
And then the Germans declared war on the Americans in 1941 in December, right after Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, December 11th.
Yeah, that's right.
And the funny thing is that the Americans didn't declare war on the Germans. It was the Germans that declared war on the Americans. It was
that was one of the things that FDR was talking about. So we didn't even have to declare war on them. They declared it on us.
I know. It was one of those colossally stupid things.
Yeah.
No, okay. I was just about to say, well, in fairness, and I'm thinking, well, do I really want to be in fairness to the...
No, there's nothing fair about that.
It's really weird.
It was just plain dumb.
But in fairness, okay, we came down... guys, Marin and Mark and all those guys, okay, and even the Lous of the world, and Eli.
And the Eli's of the world.
We're not coming down on you guys. We're just making some points, and but we've always said, right, Nick, we're not fair and we're not balanced.
That's right. We have enough fairness and balance in the mainstream media to choke a horse.
Yeah.
It's about time we started representing ourselves for what we are.
I always... It bothers me so much when I hear people talk about, being honest brokers. I wouldn't want to be an honest broker. I mean, it depends on what you mean by an honest broker, I suppose.
Yeah.
But
again,
in the mediating a conflict between two people, okay, it's nice to be a broker, but an honest broker, kind of has to be honest. So, and that's all we're trying to be, guys. We're just trying to be honest. Call it as we see it. And sorry, because Nick got pretty worked up there for a little while, guys. I almost had to give him I almost had to get a tranquilizer gun.
It just drives me crazy that it's so. How many times do I see it where what is obvious to any rational thinking person gets twisted around and taken completely out of context? It's like one of the arguments I have with my Protestant brothers and sisters is they'll have a particular Bible verse, build a whole sermon around it, and I'll say, okay, so what's the context? Where'd you get that verse? What does it mean? Let's look at the whole chapter. And when coming back to politics, it's the same thing. You can't just take one thing in isolation and pretend that's the whole issue. and yet they do it all the time. And it's enough. That's why my head starts on fire, because you got to look at the broader picture. What are the long-term consequences? Yes, we can look at the short-term circumstances, but how you help drug addicts, okay, or alcoholics. Do you give him a clean bar and a clean glass so he can drink without getting a cut lip and getting some kind of disease from the glass? Or do you help him withdraw from the drug altogether? Because that's what we're doing with I call them shooting galleries here in different parts of the country, where that's exactly what they're doing. They're not giving them the help they need. They're enabling them by giving them a safe place to continue to poison themselves. And this is the kind of logic we run into all the time on the left-hand side of the spectrum. They don't understand. You can't help somebody if all you're doing is letting them continue the destructive behavior. You got to stop that.
Now, I'm just looking online here. I can't find it, but I came across a story today talking about how many billions, I think it was somewhere in the order of $30 billion annually, that the economy loses in Canada due to, are you ready for it?
Go ahead.
Substance
abuse.
Wrong. I knew you were going to say that. Substance use.
Use.
That's what the headline said.
Use.
Yeah, and the report was done by some sort of, I have to look it up. I'll look it up during the break, and we'll do it.
A substance is anything.
No, it's substance. Well,
they mean drugs, but I mean it's just
they're talking. It's definitely substance abuse. That's what they're talking about.
Okay, all right.
Okay, and we all know what we're talking about when we say
so
substance abuse.
So it's like changing the language around prostitution from prostitution to sex workers.
But yeah, you're right. You threw me for a loop there for a second, Nick. I wasn't expecting that. but yeah, I'm going. The organization is whatever organization for the study of substance use and rehabilitation or something like that. I'll look it up because it's interesting. I'll do it during the break. But
okay.
But it's just, again, like, why are we doing this? It's substance abuse. It's not substance use. Oh, but we don't want to make them feel guilty.
Yes,
we don't want to make them feel bad.
Yes,
we're non-judgmental, and I'm going. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but I kind of think that the world could use a healthy dose of judgmentalism right now.
Well,
I don't think it's such a good thing to not be judgmental all the time. Oh, we don't want to be judgmental about that bank robber. Reminds me of the Cheech and Chong. Or no, it wasn't Cheech and Chong. We were talking about Cheech and Chong last week, right?
Yeah.
No, it's Steve Martin, right?
Yeah.
Steve Martin's he has the brilliant, absolute will get you off all the time defense, right? So he says, let's say you're in front of the judge, okay, and you're talking to the judge, and he says, this is what you say to him: Your Honor, I forgot armed robbery was illegal. Well, okay, we can't judge people. Let's not judge those guys. No, let's not judge those murderers and rapists.
Yeah,
right,
like
Paul Bernardo. We wouldn't want him. We wouldn't. Well, what's her name? Homolka. What's her first name? I don't recall. Carla. Well, Carla Homolka's out of jail.
Not only that, she's not called Carla Homolka anymore.
She changed her name, and last I heard she was
living in Montreal.
Yeah, around the Montreal area or whatever. And she's not teaching, I don't think, but she was involved in daycare or something to do with kids. I don't remember. And I'm going, oh, we don't want to judge Carla. She served her time. No, the worst thing that you could be in our society today is judgmental.
That's right. Never mind pedophilia or any of the other horrible things you could be. Judgmental is the worst.
You cannot hold people responsible for the way they are.
I really do believe, though, that we're seeing a backlash against that mentality.
Yeah, I think it's there. I don't know if we're seeing it yet, but I think it's bubbling below the surface. And it's getting ready.
I wonder what it's going to take to pop the lid on that.
It's getting ready to erupt. And that's a bad thing, by the way. I think a little bit of return to common sense is good.
Yeah.
But the pent up frustration and anger
Can swing it too far the other way.
Can swing the pendulum maybe a little further than we want. So I worry about that a little bit. It's a good observation.
Yeah, and I think that when you get to the point, if you've got kids and you're walking around the mall and they're always tugging on your pants, can I have, and you ignore them because you don't want to reward that behavior. But finally they get under your skin and you turn around and you yell at them, no, you can't have! Stop bugging me! Okay, you've overreacted. And now the kid's going, and melts down. Now you got a bigger problem. So I think you're right to be worried about that kind of stuff. And I can't help but think that, first of all, the left has created this problem by allowing these snowflakes. That's exactly the sound you're going to hear. And it goes on a lot longer than that. Now you have to throw the child under your arm and march out of the thing, out of the shopping mall with your face red, thoroughly embarrassed by your 3-year-old because the 3-year-old won that argument.
Or you're embarrassed by your own reaction to it.
And that too, you absolutely, because you realize you lost your cool when you shouldn't have.
Well, I just think, again...
Never happened to me. But.
I just want to, if you've had kids, it's happened to you.
I know. I was being facetious.
And, but Nick, give yourself a break, okay? Stop being so judgmental on yourself.
It is... You know what? It gets to a point where you have to say, if I'm not judging myself, who the hell is?
Well, I'll tell you who is. All of those lefties.
The snowflakes.
Well, the ones who argue the most about being judgmental are. Has anyone else noticed this? That the ones who say, you can't judge people. Don't judge me. Don't judge society. Don't judge those people. But they are the worst when it comes to judging people.
Oh yeah. As soon as you say something,
you are not to judge anyone until they. Well, not until they open a beer, because everybody knows the carbon dioxide in beer is not harming the environment.
Did you know that in Europe, in one of the countries in Europe, they ran out of compressed carbon dioxide to put in their beer?
No, I hadn't heard that.
That was
in
the news yesterday, the day before. I forget which country it was, Belgium or Germany. Some big beer-consuming country ran out of CO2 gas. I thought, okay, we've taken this global warming thing a little too far.
Well, you see, I know that when the government wants to get, and I'm not suggesting they should do this, by the way.
But you'll know
that they're serious about CO2 when they ban my soda maker.
Here you go.
And
no more Perrier for you.
Well, and that's the obvious place if you want to really deal with CO2 emissions in Canada. Ban beer.
Yeah, there's a reason why they haven't done it.
No, of course not. No,
if you want to see torches, pitchforks, and maple syrup in the streets, you ban beer.
Okay, we're having too much fun here, Nick. We better go for a break, and because it's the top of the hour. When we come back, we are going to have Tom Harris. Tom Harris on the show,
and
you guys stay tuned because you will enjoy it. Take a break. Stretch your legs, get something cold to drink, come back, and put your feet up and listen to this. You won't want to miss it.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. It's the Combat Zone. My guest for the next half hour or so is Tom Harris. He is the executive director of the International Climate Science Coalition, and he's been in that position for 10 years. That's a decade, Tom.
Yeah, that's right. 10 years.
Now, one of the things I want to do is, because there's a lot of, whenever you get into the climate debate, there's a lot of questions thrown around about people's credibility. What exactly, you have a degree, what is that degree in?
Well, I have a bachelor and master's in mechanical engineering with a focus on heat transfer and thermodynamics and fluid mechanics. And of course, that's very applicable to the climate because the atmosphere is a big fluid dynamic system. And in fact, engineering is applied science. People have to realize that. So I have plenty of background to understand what's going on. I don't actually originate the science. I work with scientists like Tim Ball and, previously Bob Carter. He passed away just recently, unfortunately. But those are the real climate experts. And so what I do is I work with them and I can understand what they're saying. And I co-author with them and translate what sometimes is quite complicated language into layman's language. And that really is my specialty. That is translating into layman's language. And I'll just tell you one thing, Nick, that might surprise your listeners, and that is that I actually taught second-year Earth Sciences climate change course at Carleton University for 4 sessions. Tim Patterson, who was the previous instructor, he was the professor there. He had written with me on, as a co-author in various articles and stuff, and he went on sabbatical. And he said, here, you can teach my course. And I was kind of shocked at first. And he said, no. He says, I'll give you the notes. I'll teach you. So over 4 sessions from 2009 to 2011, I actually taught about 1,500 students, 1,500 students across the world because it was on Carleton University TV. And, boy, that was a great experience, I'll tell you.
I'll bet it was.
Whatever I didn't have some sort of a handle on, I had to learn very, very quickly.
Yeah, no kidding. So, in other words, you have a little more credibility in this field than a certain genetic scientist who has his degree in fruit fly genetics.
Yeah, David Suzuki is well qualified, certainly in its field.
Yeah,
but he's not a climate expert. It is interesting. There are elements of the climate argument that relate to his field. And in fact, there's a report called Biological Impacts, which is something that I promote. It's about 1,000 pages, and it talks about the biological impacts of increasing carbon dioxide and the use of fossil fuels. And, people can check that out. It's very interesting because they cite hundreds of peer-reviewed papers, and they review them to show that, in fact, carbon dioxide is a benefit to the environment. And I'll give you the webpage. It's climatechangereconsidered.org. And that's just one of their several reports. And what they do is they show that, in fact, the idea that there's a consensus in the climate science community, well, they have thousands of references, if you look at all these reports, would disagree with that.
Well, that's part of the big argument, isn't it? All right. Yeah. Now that we've kind of cemented your credibility, or not your credibility, but your credentials into place, let's move on. And one of the things I wanted to get to is your take on Trump canceling for the United States the Paris Accord. Was that a good move? Was it a bad move? How do you see that?
Yeah, it's something that really every country should do. Certainly the developed countries like the United States and Canada have nothing to gain by being in Paris. We have targets that require us to reduce emissions immediately. And China, for example, which is now the largest emitter, it's almost twice as much emitting as the United States for carbon dioxide. They can increase emissions and still be under the Paris Agreement all the way till 2030. Okay, so people say, oh, the whole world's covered. That's a little bit like saying, oh, yeah, we both paid for this car. You paid 99% and I paid 1%, so it's fair, right?
That's right. And I get the keys every other Saturday.
Yeah, so even if it were true that we were causing dangerous climate change, you're not going to actually have, if you're excluding the largest emitter from making any cuts in the near term, then it's not going to help. But, of course, Trump didn't reject it because the climate science is wrong, although he certainly pointed that out at times. He rejected it because it's grossly unfair to the United States, and it certainly was. So he had to reject it. And in fact, Obama had no business putting it forward in the first place because the Senate had actually voted unanimously back in 1997, I believe it was. That's right. They said that they would not accept any treaty, and Paris is a treaty, really. They would not accept any treaty that did not have commensurate sort of targets for developing countries. So that's why Obama never put the Paris Agreement forward to the Senate for approval, like treaties are supposed to be approved. Instead, he called it an executive agreement, and he never sent it to the Senate because the Senate would have defeated it.
So this is called leadership by rote, where he just gets to use his executive office and the powers that come with it to override the democratic process.
Yeah, that's right. But I mean, many countries regard it as a treaty. So, certainly Trump was right to pull them out. They're not actually out until, 2020, I think. I'm not sure of the exact target, but they're not out yet. They have to give a notice, and then they have to wait 3 years, I believe. So in total, it's a 4-year period.
Well, one of the things I think is fair to say, though, is that while they may be theoretically still in the treaty until then, if they're not putting any money behind it, it's a toothless tiger.
Yeah, exactly. And, later in the interview, I'll double check the exact time that they're out, but I believe it's right around the time at the end of Trump's presidency. Okay. So they're not out yet.
Okay. Well, that's not surprising, given Trump's, when I say protectionist, America first, maybe let's call it America first, rallying cry that he got him elected and has certainly been a hallmark of his mandate to this point. You're right. He had no choice if he was going to be consistent at all, something a lot of other world leaders don't really care about, especially those on his northern border. Consistency is not their watchword. He had no choice. So one of the things I did want to also chat with you about is the idea about the federal carbon tax here in Ontario. Unless you had anything final you want to mention about Trump, but the carbon tax.
Well, yeah, I think concerning Trump, I think it's worth also saying that he was right to not sign the G7 communique, because let's read some parts of it. It says, for example, lists the countries, and it says they reaffirm their strong commitment to implement the Paris Agreement through ambitious climate action, in particular through reducing emissions. So, how could he sign that? He couldn't. Okay, and they say silly things like, we reaffirm the commitment that we have made to our citizens to reduce air and water pollution. That's fine. And our greenhouse gas emissions to reach a global carbon neutral economy over the course of the second half of the century. Now, how on earth is the G7, which doesn't include the biggest emitter, China, how are they going to have a global carbon neutral economy? It's so stupid. Really, it's unless you bring in all the big emitters, China and India included, there's no way you could do it, even if it made sense.
And they have no interest in playing that game anyway, because for their own reasons, internal political and developmental reasons, to try to reach those targets would set them back decades compared to where they are now.
Yeah, and they have an out clause anyways. People don't realize this, but the Paris Agreement, like all UN climate agreements, is based on what's called the Framework Convention on Climate Change. Okay, that's the FCCC. That was signed at the Rio Earth Summit in 1992 by Brian Mulroney and George Bush I and other world leaders. And it gives an out clause to developing countries. It says that the first and overriding priority for developing countries is poverty alleviation and development. Okay, not greenhouse gas emissions. So the bottom line is they would never close their coal stations to meet greenhouse gas targets, because coal in those countries is the cheapest form of electricity. So it would interfere with their first and overriding priorities. So even when it gets to 2030, I can see China and India and other countries saying, yeah, oh, sure, we're still in the agreement, but we got an out clause. We're not going to cut our emissions or even restrict them at 2030 because we don't have to. And it's quite true. It's Article 4. It's right there in the Framework Convention. And when they cornered the Chinese negotiator in Peru, and they, at one of the climate conferences, and they asked him about that, he said, "Our purpose is to enforce the Framework Convention, not to change it."
Yeah.
well, of course. If you have a deal that says I'll pay this much for the car, but actually I don't have to if I don't have enough money. But
yeah, they're not going to
change. Who's going to want to change that? So,
yeah, they're not going to work on their own.
It's really two agreements. They have one for developing countries that has the out clause, but we don't have that. It can cream our economy, and we're supposed to meet it anyways.
Yeah, well, fortunately, at least in Ontario, we're seeing some common sense. So not just in Ontario. There's other provinces that have said no to this too. And, of course, now I'm referring to the federal carbon tax here in Canada, and the kind of damage that would do if it was imposed the way our Prime Minister wants it imposed. So let's talk about what that would cost us, if you have any ideas on that front. because we can't get any answers out of the government. I mean, the Conservatives tried for like 2 weeks solid, and all they got were redacted paperwork that have more black than white on them, and they simply wouldn't give them any answers.
Well, my birthday was the 23rd of April, and on that day, I got a great birthday present I didn't expect, and that is that the Office of the Parliamentary Budget Officer, they actually put out something called Economic and Fiscal Outlook, and it projected that a federal carbon tax will lower Canada's GDP by about $10 billion in 2022 compared to a scenario without the tax. So there you go. $10 billion sucked out of the economy in that year, because that's when we get to our, I believe it's $50 a ton.
Right.
Of course, it accelerates over the years. And so you have to ask, okay, like $10 billion, what do we get for that? Okay. So, well, the government boasts, they say, with lower Canada, this is according to Environment and Climate Change Canada, okay? This is the government itself, okay? They say that the implementation of this kind of carbon pricing, taxes and emissions trading, they say if it's done in all provinces, their plan will lower Canada's greenhouse gas emissions in 2022 by 80 to 90 million metric tons below that which would otherwise be the case. Now, you say, whoa, that sounds like a lot, 80 to 90 million metric tons. You got to remember that China's emissions are thousands of million metric tons, okay? So if you actually plug it in to the climate models, okay, Patrick Michaels did this at the Center for the Study of Science at Washington, D.C., in the Cato Institute, actually. He said, and I have the quote right here, he said, it's not his exact quote, but this is what he said. A reduction of 19 million metric tons, that's the bigger of the two amounts,
right,
will result in, here's what will happen. Depending on the sensitivity, okay, of the atmosphere to CO2, it'll range anywhere from 1 to 2 1,000th of a degree less warming by 2100 than would otherwise occur. So Canada, and this is if you believe, that we actually cause climate change or dangerous climate change
in the first
with our
place.
CO2 emissions. Yeah, so if you accept that and you plug it into the models, according to Pat Michaels, a PhD, he was previously at the University of Virginia, a professor, 1 to 2 1,000ths of a degree less planetary warming by 2100 at a cost of $10 billion to Canadian taxpayers in 2022.
I think there's something we need to underline here. That's just in that year, because carbon starts out at $10 a ton, which is going to take money out of the economy this year, and then it's slowly going to ramp up every year. So it's not just $10 billion. It's a cumulative effect. It's $10 billion in the final year, but when you start adding all the money up, it's way higher than that.
Yeah. In fact, all of their estimates are usually way underball. Because companies leave the country and they lose tax revenue and all sorts of things.
Well, who the heck would want to work in this kind of climate?
Yeah. Well, it's going to be interesting to see what Ford does, because he's said that he's opposing the carbon tax, and people are saying, there's going to be big court fights, and actually that's a good thing, because I would hope the premier to be, because he comes in on Friday, I hope he actually uses some of the science of the non-governmental International Panel on Climate Change. In fact, we have articles coming out. And I'll send you a link. It'll be out probably in a day or two, where we're actually saying, let's hope he uses the science in these reports to, not just say, it's too expensive, we can't do it. But more than that, you have to say, and it doesn't matter because the science is not there. You could make the argument, Nick, that if there was a worldwide catastrophe, that it makes sense for the developed world, the rich countries, to lead the way. Okay, so that argument is the kind of argument that Suzuki and others present. They say, well, we have to lead the way. We're the wealthy part of the world. Well, yeah, but that would only apply if it was real, if the problem was really real. I mean, you wouldn't build massive asteroid defense systems if you didn't see any asteroids and there was no forecast of any coming close. So I mean, some people say, well, in that case, maybe you do have to prepare years in advance. But in the climate change case, the real world, and that's what matters, is not showing anything abnormal happening. We've had 1 degree Celsius warm in the last century and a bit, coming out of the Little Ice Age. That's not significant. We've had 7 inches sea level rise in the past century. That's not a problem. There hasn't been an increase in extreme weather. I mean, the increase in pH of the oceans, all of this is based on forecasts from computer models, okay? If you just look at what's really happening in the real world, there's nothing to be concerned about because the changes are so tiny. So it's all based on the idea that we know that, say, 2060, 2080, 2100, we know what's going to happen then. And it's based on, as you know, computer models that don't work.
Yeah, well, that's the thing about computer models. They're only as good as the information you put in. So what we've got here is a situation. I try to explain this whenever I get into this fight myself online. Say, look, if you're going to use, one of the things the argument is, well, we understand how the climate works. Really? You're going to tell me that we understand the single most complex system the Earth has, and we can't predict the weather out 2 weeks and get it right? I mean, I know weather isn't climate. I get that. But the comparison, I think, is still valid because, wait a minute. You're telling me that by the year 2100, we're either all going to drown or fry. And yet it's no hotter or colder than it was when I was a kid. And there are seasonal variances, and some summers are hotter than others. Like this year's relatively cool, although it's supposed to warm up next year. Last year was relatively cool. The winter was long and brutal. So, you know, when is all this supposed to take place? And they keep saying, well, 20, 30 years from now. Well, 20, 30 years ago, they were saying the same thing.
Yeah. And, you know, Nick, there is no such thing as a real scientific theory of climate. I mean, you know, F equals ma or E equals mc squared. These are theories that have been proven over the centuries. But there is no real theory of climate. I mean, basically what they're doing is they're taking the data and they're curve fitting and they keep adjusting. Oh, that didn't work, so we'll just tweak this, tweak that. But if you actually go back to, let's say, 1990 and you plug in the actual increase in carbon dioxide and other factors into the computer models, you don't get today's conditions. Okay? So what they do then is they tweak it, and they keep tweaking it. If you have to keep tweaking it, that sort of and you know, one thing, Nick, if you look at the forecasts, there's like over 100 models, and they all forecast something a bit different, some very different. If we had a solid theory of climate, there would be one model. You know, we wouldn't have like 100 and all giving different answers.
Yeah.
I mean, that alone should tell people, oh, why do you have all these different models if you know what's going on? Well, they don't know what's going on. The field is very immature.
Well, let's just one more quick technical question because I think I know the answer, but I want to hear it from you. You know it better than I would. Where are we as far as atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide gas right now? I like to express it in parts per million because I understand that lingo.
Yeah, we're just over 400. People get all excited about that. But, you know, you have to realize that it's near one of the lowest levels in Earth's history. We can go back about 500 million years looking at proxies, which are indicators of CO2, indicators of temperature, things like that. And we can see times when CO2 level was 1,100% of today. Okay, I'm not talking about the 30-some-odd% rise in the last century, which environmentalists get all excited. Oh, my God, 35% rise. Yeah, but we had 1,100% of today's conditions back around 440 million years ago, and the Earth was stuck in the coldest period of the last 500 million years. Okay, so if you actually look at the geologic record, and this is one of the reasons why you rarely hear geologists supporting the climate scare, they look at the real history of the Earth, okay, not the computer models. They look at what did happen when CO2 was 1,000 parts per million, and they don't see any correlation between temperature and CO2. I mean, sometimes CO2 is high and temperature is high, sometimes it's low and CO2 is high. You know, there just isn't a correlation. And so, you know, that's one of the reasons, I guess, why Suzuki and company don't seem to involve a lot of geologists.
Yeah, well, they won't even enter into debate. And when they do, they get their clocks cleaned, like down in Australia. Some real climate scientists who didn't give any quarter to Suzuki because they didn't know who he was, just some, you know, weird-looking Canadian guy coming down telling us, you know, 20-year-old data that's out of date and didn't know what the data point sets were called. So they called him out and crucified him on it. I mean, they didn't do it harshly, but they embarrassed the guy because he didn't know what he was talking about.
Yeah, you know, and I don't ascribe evil motives to people like Suzuki, okay? I think that he really believes what he's saying. And he does consult experts who support his point of view. We consult experts who don't. You know, so I mean, the thing I think for people to understand, and this is really important, I had teachers from the United States call me and they say, oh, I listened to Suzuki and his scientists, and they say one thing, and you and your scientists say something else. I don't know what to tell my students. I say, that's fine. tell them you don't know what to tell them, because nobody really knows the future of climate. Okay, I mean, some of the scientists on our side are very definite. You know, they say, oh, we're headed for this cooling or whatever. But we don't really know that. I mean, the fact is, it appears that we are headed for cooling because the sun seems to be going into a weak phase. And the last time that happened, we had serious cooling. And actually around 2060, Nick, it's interesting that there's going to be something called a grand solar minimum, which is when all the various cycles of the sun, and there's 11-year cycles, you know, cycles that are a few centuries, when they all hit bottom at the same time, the sun's output will be somewhat less.
Right.
Now, that isn't enough to cool the Earth a lot. But what happens is when the sun is weak, it puts out less solar wind, okay? And that's important because coming in from the galaxy are what are called galactic cosmic rays. Okay? This is important. This is a field called cosmoclimatology. It's a new field, and it's really quite interesting. When supernovas explode in the galaxy, if we're anywhere near them, we get bathed with galactic cosmic rays. And although they call them rays, they're not rays. That was the name was given to them before we knew that they were actually particles.
Right.
But they come zooming into our solar system, they come into our atmosphere, they interact with the atmosphere, and they cause clouds. And clouds cool the Earth. Now, when the sun is quite active, the solar wind keeps a lot of these cosmic rays out. Okay, it keeps them out of the solar system, so only some come through. But when the sun is weak, like it will be in 2060, you get a first-order effect, and that is that there's less sunlight coming to the Earth, so the Earth will be a little cooler. But also, because there's less solar wind, more cosmic rays are coming in from outside the galaxy, from outside the solar system. These are called galactic cosmic rays, and they form more clouds. So the Earth becomes cloudier too, and that also cools the planet. So when you add those two together, you get pretty significant cooling, according to some of these experts. And that may very well be the case in 2060. Now, there's, some of the scientists are saying that will overwhelm any warming caused by CO2, if it indeed happens at all. But I think that's the point, is this is a very new field, okay? And we should help people adapt to climate change. We should help the researchers continue to study the field. I'm not saying zero out the funding. What I'm saying is that it's ridiculous to be spending, as we are now, 95% of climate finance across the world, which, by the way, is over $1 billion a day. Okay, that's how much is going into climate finance. And that's just what we can track. It's probably a lot more. But of that $1 billion a day, 95% of it is going in to try to stop climate change. Only 5% of it is going to help real people today adapt to real climate change that's happening, which happens all the time because, we're on a dynamic planet.
Right.
And that is really almost criminal. I mean, if you think about it, we're letting real people today who suffer due to climate change, there's increasing deserts in some parts of the world, and they need wells. They need to have people moved out of the areas. In some parts of the Arctic, there's permafrost melt and houses are falling down. In other parts, I understand that there is permafrost increase. So these kinds of changes occur, and people need help adapting. And, a real good example of how even in the developed world we can help adapt and prepare for climate change, whatever happens, it occurred during Hurricane Sandy when it hit New York City. There were parts of Manhattan that did not lose its electricity or its cable or its internet or anything because their cables were buried underground.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
So I mean, those are the kinds of projects that we need to fund, is things that harden our society to climate change, to extreme weather, to whatever is going to happen. But instead, because of the climate scare, gathering the attention of the media, almost all the money, 95% of it, goes to try to stop what theoretical models that don't work forecast for the future. Almost none of the money goes to helping real people now, which I think is really criminal. And, you would think that left-wing social justice warriors would be very upset about this.
You would think, if they were honest, but they're not.
Yeah, well, and in fact, the whole idea that the climate issue is the most important problem in the world, which is, of course, what the UN constantly says, it doesn't make any sense. And it's not reflected by the UN's own poll. People can go to the UN webpage and they can, can't remember, I'll think of the link in a minute, but they have a questionnaire where you're supposed to go in and list the world's top priorities that the UN should work on. And they have things like education and fresh drinking water and, encouraging peace and criminal activity, fighting that, and all sorts of things. And they've had, last I saw, they had over 7 million people voting across the world. And everybody, it's called My World. I think that's what you go on the UN page and you click on My World. And I think it'll come right up. I'll send you the link later.
Yeah, please do that.
And you can vote.
Believe me. Believe me, I will. And I hate to do this to you, but we're down to the last 90 seconds or so.
Sure.
And time. So let me, in the last minute, if you could just give people some advice about how to actually try and change the mindset of politicians and the average person walking down the street so they understand that while doing what we're doing isn't working, there are concrete things you can do to help defend ourselves against either climate change or natural disasters, and where to put the money.
Yeah, I think the best thing for people to do is to call into talk radio like your shows. Go through places where you can bypass the media. I think that's the first thing. Letters to the editor are sometimes effective. Writing to your MP is not very effective because they just go with the flow. On the other hand, if you can get on talk radio and mention that MP, write to letters to the editor and mention that MP, and then tell the MP, you may actually accomplish something. But I think more than anything, people have to just say, look, which is more important? And this is the question the UN asked. Is it more important to have good education and fresh drinking water and good electricity and peace? Or is it more important to possibly affect climate in 50 years? That's the question the UN asked. And the world overall put climate change at the very bottom of the list. And that's what people need to do, is they need to make it not just, do you support fighting climate change? The question should be, do you think we should be spending $1 billion a day on climate change when these problems all exist? Like, how would you order them? Okay. And that's the question. How would you order the priorities? And I'll tell you, very few people would say, stopping climate change is more important than my kids' education.
All right, I have to stop you there. Your website is International Client Science Coalition?
Well, climatescienceinternational.org.
Okay, that's what I was after. And Tom, that's half an hour. And I thoroughly enjoyed listening to you. It's always a treat, and I hope you'll come back and join us again.
I will, that's sure. Thanks, Nick.
All right, thanks, Tom, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, that brings us up to the bottom of the hour. We'll take a short break. Joseph and I will be back with you after that, right here on the Combat Zone. Welcome back to the Combat Zone, folks. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Tom Harris. He's always a lot of fun to interview. He cares. He's does a great job presenting the other side you never hear, and just basically asks some pretty straightforward questions. So it was a treat to have him, and I certainly want to thank him for being our guest. And I look forward to interviewing him again, and who knows what else will come down the pike. Now, go ahead. You're going to say something.
Oh, I just wanted to make sure that people knew we put it up in the chat room. The that website address that Tom was talking about just a few minutes ago.
Yes.
The UN website for the poll. The URL is www.myworld2015, all one word, .org. So it's www.myworld2015.org. Now, I was checking this out during the break, Nick.
Right.
And I have to tell you that the top, they've got a whole list of different things that you get to vote on. And at the very bottom, you get to, if you think that your topic is not included on the list,
you get to suggest it.
You can click on the suggest a topic or an issue or whatever the language is that they use. But they use here what is a common trick that pollsters use for online polls or any of these things, okay? And that is that they put at the very top the question or the issue that they want people to click on.
Hoping they won't go beyond that.
Because that is actually a common trick. In fact, anytime a poll doesn't randomize the order of the answers that you're asking questions to or seeking the questions that you're looking for answers to, it's a problematic poll. The data is skewed because we know from research that if you don't have the data or if you don't have the answers or the questions randomized so that every time somebody's asking you the question, it's coming up in a different order, then the results are going to be skewed. And some pollsters, not the reputable ones, but there are some people out there that use polling to solicit a particular type of answer, and they're not interested in what the answer is. They're interested in not research. They're interested in using the poll in order to change public opinion as opposed to test public opinion.
Is that what they call a push poll?
Well, a push poll is kind of like that, except for with the push poll, you have a whole number of introductory statements that are designed to elicit a particular response.
So something like that would be like, given the fact that global warming is real, how do you feel or what do you feel is the top priority? Something along that line.
Well, probably a little more subtle than that.
I'm just using that as an example.
Right, but it's a good example, but if I was designing it, what I would do is I would say, something along the lines of, if the sea levels rise, did you know that the sea levels rise by 3 inches, that the city of New York will be wiped off the face of the map? Do you think that global warming is a good or bad? Okay, so
well, it depends on your opinion of New York City.
Next week, we're going to. I'm making an executive decision here, Nick, even though I have no right to make an executive decision.
It's okay, I don't mind.
Okay, so next week we're going to play a clip from Yes Minister or Yes Prime Minister. I can't remember which one it is, and it has to do with polling. So mark your calendars. Make sure you tune in next week, people, because you will really, really understand how polls can can be designed to elicit exactly the answer that you want. You know the clip, right? It's not a long clip. It's maybe 2-3 minutes long, but it's a beautiful illustration of how it's really done.
Yeah, that series is a great documentary.
It is absolutely. So that's it. Also, I just wanted to also point out, Nick, because I mentioned this before we did the last half-hour segment with Tom, and that is that the substance abuse or substance use, and so I looked it up during the break, as I said I would, and the organization, or there were two organizations that were involved in this study. The first is the Canadian Centre on Substance Use and Addiction, and the second one is the Canadian Institute for Substance Use Research. And together they came up with some statistics for the year 2014. They estimate that their substance use, quote unquote, cost the Canadian economy somewhere in the order of $38.4 billion in 2014. And remember, that was before legalized marijuana, which is now coming down the tubes at us at warp speed.
That is such a disaster in the making. I mean, you go into a liquor store, right? And sometimes you're a little, you want to try something new, but you're not really sure. And you're standing there, and I've done this myself, standing there looking at two different products. They're relatively the same, but I like to do that with apple ciders because I really enjoy a good apple cider. So I remember I was talking to a lady, and I said, well, what about this one? Do you have this one? Yes, we do. What do you think of it? And she said, well, it's not as sweet as some of the others. If you like it dry, then you're probably going to like it. If you like something that's a little more sweet, then maybe this other one would be better. In other words, they've done a little bit of taste testing. I'm not saying they sat around and cracked open a 2-4 and drank it all, but they get the little 1-ounce glasses and they taste it, so they have some idea of what this stuff is like, so that when customers come in and are asking about it, then they've got something they can share with the customers. So now let's warp ahead a year. You walk into your local LCBO and you're holding 2 bags of weed in your hand. One's Acapulco Gold and the other one is God knows what. Now you're going to ask, okay, so which one do you prefer?
Now,
is this what we've been descended to?
Do you think somebody's actually going to sell under the trade name Acapulco Gold?
That's the only name I remember from high school for pot.
Oh, I see. Now you know what, Nick? I know that Justin Trudeau has smoked,
Well,
and if
we're not sure he ever quit.
I'm not told that Andrew Scheer has said that he experimented with marijuana as well.
I think there's millions of us who have.
Well, I want to tell you, I never did.
No?
I never tried it once.
I did in
never,
high school.
Never was interested. And I'll tell you why. Because I didn't want to be one of those potheads. I mean, it was just the guys that did this at school were idiots.
Yeah, for the
They
most part.
really were. I mean, sorry guys. I'm not saying I'm better than you, or I'm not judging you. Okay.
Oh, God.
But
you can dump that
seriously,
saying anytime.
I know.
But in my personal circumstances, it was a little bit different. I won't get into the details, but it wasn't, I didn't do it at school. There was a place a little more private. But the thing, part of what turned me off about it was, first of all, it stinks to high heaven. The stuff, it gets in your clothes. It's like tobacco, right? It gets in your clothes. It gets in your hair. And there was a commercial one time where a mother was downstairs yelling at her 20-something-year-old son to go out and get a job. And he's up there toking away. And she hollered, "What are you doing?" And he takes his hand and he waves it in the midst of all this smoke as if he can somehow clear the room and get rid of the odor. I mean, this is the kind of intelligence you're dealing with.
Well, that's the kind of intelligence that you have when you smoke marijuana.
Yeah, well,
That's
it's
as
obvious.
simple as that.
Now, I can hear a lot of people saying, well, I use it recreationally and I hold down a good job. Some people can, but that's not the point. The point is, look at the nightmare. We have no ability to decide when someone is impaired, and impairment with marijuana is instant. It's not something that's like a glass of wine or a shot of whiskey. You can have one, and you enjoy the flavor. You enjoy it adds to like a good glass of wine adds to the enjoyment of a meal. That's why you drink it, not to get drunk. For most of us, some people have problems with alcohol. We understand that, but for the most of us, if we sit down with beef or fish, we have red or white wine, depending on what's appropriate, and it just clears the palate for the next bite. That's its job. You can enjoy alcohol without becoming inebriated. With pot, from the first toke, boom, it affects you immediately. That's why they do it. They don't do it because it smells good.
Now, it's funny you say that because you're getting right into the jargon, right?
Yeah.
Like, see,
I'm
from
going
the
back 30 years.
From the first, if I was me, I'd go from the first puff.
No.
From the first time you inhale it. No, but not you, Nick. It's listen,
I'm not afraid to admit I used the stuff when I was in high school. But that was 35, almost 40 years ago now.
I still didn't use it. Wouldn't use it today. I
have no interest in it now.
I'm telling you, don't use it, guys, especially if you're younger, okay? It just saps your ambition, your intelligence. I mean, I can't say enough bad things about it. Do not be fooled by the fact that it becomes legal. Remember, there is a world of difference between legal and illegal on the one hand, and right and wrong on the other hand.
And all you'll end up doing is feeling lazy, feeling like you want to eat pizza, so the pizza business is going to go through the roof, and you get nothing done. And anyway, there's all kinds of studies out there now that are showing that for the young mind, it's very detrimental.
It's detrimental for an older mind too, but it's
not
devastating for younger minds.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
The stuff is just nasty. Stay away from it.
Absolutely, 100%.
Yep.
Nick, what we haven't done for a long time?
Oh my God. I love this sound because I know what it means.
Yeah. It's stupid politicians.
And the award this week goes to...
hang on a second. Let's wait until the theme music is... Maybe we should shorten our theme music for this, but it's
fade it out a little bit.
Okay.
Or we can just talk over it because it's as silly as the...
yeah, we could, but It's good music. Okay, the award this week. We haven't done this for a long time, so
we got to get back.
We have
to
to
this.
get back to doing it. Okay, all right. Jim Watson.
Jumping Jim Watson.
Jiminy Cricket, Jim Watson.
Oh my God! I couldn't believe this when you told me.
Okay, guys. Mayor of Canada's capital city, Ottawa, Jim Watson, has called on Canadians, for those who would get the invitation, and in Ottawa, a lot of senior diplomats and politicians and business people get an invitation every year to the 4th of July party put on by the American ambassador to Canada. And it's a great networking opportunity. It's a great informal gathering where, diplomacy and formal diplomacy goes on, etc. And the mayor, who always gets an invitation,
I was going to say,
and attends, decided this year not only that he's going to boycott it, but he's calling on other Ottawa citizens to boycott this as well. And his rationale is he wants to teach those nasty Americans a lesson for the way that they're treating Canada, or let's be more precise, the way Donald Trump is perceived to be treating Canada. But Donald Trump, President Trump, is not necessarily being the nicest guy towards Canada and towards Prime Minister Trudeau right now. I get that. But, is this such a childish, infantile, puerile, I'm trying to think of more adjectives to use here.
It's as infantile as it gets. I mean, let's face it. If you can't lay your politics aside for one day and celebrate the birthday of your best trading partner and closest ally, then you don't deserve the post of mayor.
But it's more than that, Nick. It's not even setting it aside, okay? The fact is that if you want to solve these problems and you want to show that Donald Trump is wrong, then you have to participate in these kinds of things. Yeah. I mean, how do you build the kinds of relationships that are essential to developing these partnerships and having agreements, etc.? I mean, it's networking and personal relationships are so important. And in point of fact, what Jim is doing, what Mayor Watson is doing in Ottawa right now, I have to tell you, it is doing nothing but confirming exactly what Donald Trump is saying. When he talks about Justin Trudeau being weak, effeminate, a bit of a wimp, I don't even know if that's the language. I don't know if that's even the language he used. I know he used the word weak, but the point I'm making here is
he could have used that language.
It is so childish and so immature. And so impudent to do this. And it does nothing but confirm what Donald Trump is saying, at least presumably in his mind and in the mind of those Americans who are cheering him on with his comments about Canada and about Canadian politicians. But you know what? It's as bad as Donald Trump. It's exactly the same thing that Donald Trump is doing. Donald Trump picks up some sand in the sandbox.
Throws it in the other guy's
throws
face.
A clump of sand at us in Canada, and thank goodness that we have Jim Watson standing up and defending Canada by picking up a sand in the sandbox himself and throwing it back and going, there taught you a lesson, President of the United States.
As he hits him in the knee with it. Yeah.
Okay, and I'm going, I cannot believe that I'm going to say this, but I actually think that Justin Trudeau handled that whole situation with a certain amount of dignity, and I think he handled it right. It was measured. He didn't respond in kind. He was water off the duck's back. Can you believe that I'm saying that? But
first of all,
the world has really gone to the dogs.
Yes, it has. But let's be honest. Let's be honest. I don't think for a moment that those were sincere words. I'm being cynical, and I'm trying to read the guy's mind. But what's he ever done that has been sincere?
Well, what do you mean? Who are we talking about now?
Justin Trudeau.
You don't think that his words were... Oh, of course they weren't sincere. You think that he wasn't insulted, offended, that he didn't want to lash back, or that he's not sitting around in his office and probably toking with him and his buddies down there and going, yeah, we pulled a fast one over on Donald Trump.
Yeah, until Donald Trump threw it in their faces.
We're so much better than Donald Trump. but we're not judging because we don't judge in Canada. That's
the point.
That's
getting
the next
back
big
to
thing.
Jim, though. First of all, what business is it of the mayor of any city, never mind the nation's capital, about international affairs between between our prime minister and the leader of our biggest trading partner? He's a municipal politician. Leave the federal politics to the federal politicians. If they want to embarrass themselves, fine, let them. If I don't care. If I'm the mayor of any city XYZ, I don't care what the federales do. I don't care what happens. I got a city to run. That's my priority. I'm going to worry about the things that happen in my own backyard long before I ever worry about what tiff they're having 5 flights of stairs up from me. So this is more of the nonsense. Be gracious. Accept the invitation. The ambassador is not going to bring it up unless you do. So don't bring it up.
Well,
enjoy the party and the free booze and have some fun.
Well, I will say this, okay? 2 words to our friend Jimbo Watson. Grow up.
It's a little late for that, but it's good advice.
Yeah, grow up. Anyway, that's this week's Stupid Politician Award to Mayor Jim Watson. And congratulations, Jim. And I don't know, we haven't decided yet whether we'll send you a certificate. We'll talk about that off air later
fun.
on.
That would be fun. And it's too bad we didn't have time. I'll let the music play out. There you go. Because I would have given out a double award tonight. We don't normally do that, but Maxine Waters, down in the States, she's as loopy as they come. The only person in the United States government as an elected representative, she's with the 43rd District of California, is Nancy Pelosi. That woman is absolutely a mental basket case. Okay, there's no. If you watch video clips of her, I remember when Trump got elected, she thought they just elected George Bush, and that she just couldn't see how they're going to work. And Maxine Waters is standing behind her, looking around with these great big eyeballs, going, "What? What did she say?" So Maxine Waters goes out and does a what's the word I'm looking for? Not a protest, but she does a rally. And she incites people to attack Republicans. Get in their face, push them. She's inciting a riot. She violates the criminal code. Now, I checked this on Snopes. Snopes has nothing to say about it yet. It's probably too fresh a story. So if it's true, and I put the if in there on purpose because I did my best to find out whether or not this is a true story. But it sounds exactly like something Maxine would do. She's that loopy. If it's true, then she faces up to 5 years in jail if she's convicted. And Trump is exactly the kind of guy to look at the JAG and say, or not the JAG, but the Attorney General and say, go get her. He would do it.
Lock her up.
You got her.
Up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
listen,
she would have won it if it hadn't been for jumping Jim Watson.
Yeah, listen, I just want to clarify something. I see that Marin asked a question about whiskey.
Yes.
She said, no, in the chat room, no whiskey for you guys either. And I just want to clarify, no whiskey here. No, there's a whiskey-free zone.
Don't pay any attention to the sound of clinking glasses in the background.
Yeah, that bottle that's sitting over on the desk in the corner, and
that's for medicinal purposes only.
Well, it's for visual purposes.
Oh, visual.
Unfortunately, you guys can't see us because we're just doing audio, not video.
Okay, just imagine it isn't there.
It's not. No whiskey. No whiskey on this show. And if
my God, if there
not
was.
that there's anything wrong with it, because we're Canadians. We are not judgmental.
That's right, and I know that Marin would never judge us.
No.
So I can't wait to see the comments now. Oh my God, bunch of alcoholics on the show tonight.
Yeah,
not quite.
We actually, I was telling Nick when we were experimenting with doing Facebook Live, and we had during the breaks these pictures, and I came across a great one where you could transpose a caricature of my head and Nick's head amongst a couple of guys who were sitting around drinking these characters.
Actually, there's a great video just like that where they took a soccer team trying to kick a penalty shot, and they replaced the heads of the players on defense, the ones who stand there and hold their crotches so they don't get the ball dare I say, in the testicles. And they put Angela Merkel, Justin Trudeau, and 2 other world leaders who I can't remember, Marcone, and I think it's Marcone. Anyway, 4 major world leaders. And the guy kicking the penalty shot is Trump. So Trump hauls off, and he lets the first one go. And the whole time he's talking about the different problems he's having with Canada, the trade deficit and all that sort of thing. And he kicks the ball, and he nails Justin right squarely in the forehead, drops him like a deer with a shot by a rifle. Okay, so he gets back up, launches another kick, and Justin moves positions. Okay, he goes down to the far right end as you face him. And sure enough, nails him in the forehead again, drops him again. So for the 3rd time, he says, okay, enough of that. And in the background, you're hearing, now Canadians are very polite, but we're not going to be pushed around by Donald Trump. And he turns his back to Donald Trump so that he can't get hit in the head again in the face. So the kicker, Donald Trump in this case, launches another kick with a curve to it, goes around Justin, hits the crossbar of the goal, comes back and still nails him in the forehead and drops him like a deer. Oh, my God, it's funny. So if you get a chance to find that, I have it posted on my Facebook page, and I'm sure it's out there in the meme world or whatever. Go find it, because if you can't laugh over that, you don't have a funny bone.
Okay, look, guys, we're running up here against our 2 hours, and it's been a great show, Nick.
We've had a ball.
Our thanks to Tom Harris, and It was a great interview and very informative. And Tom, we look forward to having you on again soon, and maybe launching your own podcast. But we'll have to discuss that. So, and listen, for all of you out there that were listening tonight or that are listening later on, downloading the podcast, tell your friends about us. Send out an email, share on Facebook and other social media.
Yeah, we're going to need your help to spread the word.
Help us spread the word. Our goal is to become Canada's flagship conservative talk show. And, we don't take ourselves too seriously. We don't take you too seriously either, Eli.
But we take the issues very seriously.
But we take the issues very seriously, especially when it comes to Jimbo Watson, Mayor of Ottawa.
Oh, God. All right, guys, thanks for listening. We'll see you all again next week right here on the Combat Zone.